Welcome everyone who's here. My name is Elise and I'm on the board for Our Family Farms. I also have a farm with my husband, Jeff, Oshala Farm in Southern Oregon in Applegate Valley. And I think what we'd like to do is just kind of we have a couple, our biggest topic this conversation is about water and drought and solutions like dryland farming. And then also just looking at some ways that Our Family Farms and other organizations are, just wanting to hear from farmers who are having a difficult time with the drought right now, and how we can help get help either at a regional or statewide level. There's a lot of emergency kind of funds being put together, and we know that people are reaching out for help pretty much every day. So if you are needing that, please contact Jennifer is there with Our Family Farms, either Jennifer or myself, and we can connect you with what we know is starting to, gathering information for people. So I think it would be nice just to start with introducing yourself, where you're calling in from, just a sentence or two about the farm, if you're farming, and kind of if you have an immediate drought irrigation issue that you want to talk about later on, we can do that. But that would be helpful just to document so that Jennifer can reach out to you later and just make sure that we have your contact so that we can, when there are funds available, we can help you out with that, or when we know that there's different funds happening, so, or programs. So I'll start off and let people, I guess I'll just call people in order. And so just, my name is Elise. I'm a board member with Our Family Farms. I'm also a farmer. I have Oshala Farm in Southern Oregon, Applegate. We grow medicinal culinary herbs, 84 different varieties, certified organic. And yeah, happy to be here. So we'll do you last, Andrew. So Diane.
Hi, I'm Diane. I have Belle Avenir Farm in Ashland. It's 5 acres, and I primarily raise lamb for sale direct to clients. So I do farm kill. And then I also sell pastured eggs, and we have orchard and kitchen garden and such that we grow things for ourselves and do value added.
Vicki.
Hi, my name is Vicki Hunter. I'm new to the area. I have a hobby farm. We're just starting and trying to employ some different techniques, swales, permaculture, hugelculture, different. So I'm not selling anything at this point, just trying to survive and works and learn more.
Nice. Well, where are you located, Vicki?
I am out past Weimer. I'm in River.
Nice.
Actually, up in the hills.
Great. Dr. Seidler. Gotta have you unmute, Ray.
Yeah, why don't I unmute? I'm Ray, environmental microbiologist, long since retired. I've been a technical or science advisor to Our Family Farms and a former board member, and I don't know what to do with myself. So my wife and I have started a small, about a 1 acre lavender farm. We are on the east side of Ashland on Pompadour Drive. If anybody knows where that is. And we irrigate on a deep well or from a deep well, and I worry about it every single day because we have some neighbor wells that have gone dry.
Thanks, Ray. Welcome to farming. I saw that. Eric George, is that you?
Hey. I'm based out of Eugene, and I'm looking for farm opportunities north of Eugene right now, and avid fan of a couple of the speakers.
Welcome, Eric. Karen.
Hi, I live in Glendale, and I have a small farm that I just do on my own, mainly for my own lawnmowers, eating, milk. I milk my sheep. I have registered Romanov, and I butcher my own meat. I raise parrots. I have livestock guardian dogs protecting my sheep, and I also tame wild horses.
Nice, welcome.
Thank
If
you.
we could add to, if you're having current like irrigation issues, that would be helpful just for us to note. Just going forward, other than sleepless nights, just either worrying or being grateful that you have water. But if you actually are not able to irrigate this season, that would be great to note. So
I have plenty of water. It's just how to get it to the fields. I don't have a way to get it to the fields because it's gravity fed.
okay. Thank you, welcome. How about we hear from Barbara?
Hi, I made it here. I'm actually a downstream neighbor of Andrews. I have 30 acres with a big restoration project along the stream, and I grow hay. And that's what was being done on this place before I came. I also lease part of my place to an organic seed farmer, vegetable seed farmer. And I'm just really interested because my end of our Thompson Creek dried up this year in June. That's where my water comes from legally. And I also have a 400-foot deep well that's not been developed really. So, but nevertheless, even if I had that well, I am very concerned with being a responsible water user. So that's why I'm here, to learn what I can. I also have horses that graze, but they don't worry about the water much.
Welcome, Barbara. Eileen, for those of you that joined later too, we're just introducing yourself, what region you're calling in from or where you're farming, if you are farming, and sharing just a sentence or two about what you're farming and doing. And then also if you're having any current or irrigation issues other than sleepless nights, just worrying about it or being grateful.
There we go. I actually don't quite live in the area yet, but I'm going to be moving into the area. And I just started looking at Joe's list, and I just saw the invitation to view this. And I'm going to be new to everything, but I'm very much interested in how things are going with the water situation in the area. I'm going to be in Applegate area, so.
Great, well, welcome. We look forward to connecting more with you when you land here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be coming up in the next, well, over the course of the next year, yeah.
Nice, good. Aluna, hi.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. My name is Aluna, and I am in Talent on 17 acres. My son Leo is here chiming in. And I've been trying to lay the groundwork for an active farm for the past several years. It's been slow going. We had a small crop last year where we actually grew some food and sold it through a neighbor farm or a friend's farm. But this year I decided not to plant anything because of the impending drought, and I'm glad I didn't. Our creek is almost dry, and our creek has been regulated down to the very oldest water right in the state, short of the Klamath Indian tribe. So so there are only 2 users that I know of on our creek, and it's down to on. So yeah, I'm really concerned about the issues in our region. So thanks for holding this workshop. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Welcome. I'm glad you're here, Luna. Brianna.
Hello, good to see everybody here. I live here in Williams on a small farm that's a little less than 11 acres. I have joined this call because I want to know more about dryland farming. I think it's very important. I think it's very accessible for all of us to be able to do that and learn more about it. So yeah, I'm here learning about that.
Now you have a future farmer there.
Yes, we do.
Sean.
Hi there. 6 acres out here, and we're just kind of starting out fresh. So yeah, I've got about an acre under cultivation this year, growing lots of food and peppers, and it's just, you know, fed by our well. I'm a pretty natural farming geek, and I do some work with different rec farms transitioning, you know, living soils and consultation work with them. So yeah, we've been crushing it with our biochar and our field prep this year. We've been really good on water, but yeah, just always here to.
Nice, welcome. Is it Colin?
Yep, Colin. Hey, I'm calling in from Williams. I do not own a farm, not currently working in the industry. Just a fan of farmers, of farming, and a curious bystander and benefactor. So, thanks.
And eater and supporter, I presume.
Yes, exactly.
Nice, nice. Welcome. Glad you're here. Jonathan is here as well, but I think Jonathan, your audio is not going to allow you to speak. But we'll try.
He mentioned in the chat that it's not going to try to talk.
Yeah.
He said he grows East Asian medicinal plants in Southern Oregon, and I'm hoping to learn more how to approach growing perennial plants in drought conditions while maintaining their medicinal constitutes.
Nice, nice. Welcome, Jonathan. Sad to not hear your voice, but it's a good lesson for, I guess, listening for all of us. So, so again, for those of you, I think, do we miss anybody else coming in? We are recording this because we have a bunch of people who also couldn't make it on the call but wanted to hear the recording. So thank you for sharing where you're all at. You know, I think we're all in the same situation, but in different varying levels of just a lot of concern of the future of farming and where we're at with the water issues. I just, you know, I commend Andrew because he's been like hitting this dryland farming for years and years, and all of us are like, yeah, it's a good idea, Andrew, we're just going to keep farming. But, you know, he's been thinking about this for a long time and is a really great example of what we can do. So I'm really excited to hear you share what's been going on, the trials and tribulations. I'm sure, I know it's not all easy, and yeah, there's a lot to it, but I think, you know, being that we're at this point where we are so concerned about the water in the future, it seems smart for all of us to be looking at other viable options or different consistent irrigation issues. And I'm really excited to hear from other people too on what they're doing to help in conservation levels and all of that, which we can get to later. And Andrew, maybe we can just kind of, I guess you're somewhat a neighbor in both ways, in different areas, and a good friend, and an amazing board member, past board member for Our Family Farms. So for those of you that don't know Our Family Farms, if you're interested in getting more involved, we're a nonprofit that started with the campaign to ban GMO crops in Jackson County in 2014. So we passed that initiative and then went through a legal lawsuit with Monsanto to prove that GMO crops are indeed a financial negative impact on organic farmers and traditional seed farmers. So we've held true with that in place, the ban, and we're still trying to keep that for getting on the books and protect the GMO-free seed sanctuary that we've created in Jackson County, and have also really worked hard to get Josephine County on the books as well, which has been a very consistent, hard battle the last few years, but we haven't let go of it. So there's lots of people on the call that have done tons of work with that, but just kind of let you know if you're interested in more about our family farms, just let us know. Yeah, so Andrew, can you just maybe give yourself a little introduction more about what you're doing, and we're excited to see the tour and what you've been up to.
Sure. Well, yeah, great to have you all here. I started woofing, if you guys know what that is, just kind of wandering around in 2008 up in Washington, and found a really awesome farm that I worked on for a year. And then after that, transitioned down into Humboldt and worked on 2 different farms there. One's Shake Fork Community Farm, and then the Newcomb Family Farm is where I got introduced to dry farming, which I'll share more about later. In 2014, bought a little piece of land on Thompson Creek, upstream from Barbara, and farmed there for almost 6 years. And full disclosure, I have kind of stepped out of farming the last couple of years. Doing restoration work along the creek and in the forest has been a big draw to me, and seeing that our water comes from our surrounding areas. Kind of got drawn to that, and last year helped start a new nonprofit, the Beaver Coalition. We'll just do a quick plug. This is our logo, the Beaver Coalition. That's backwards. .org, a lot of information. But beavers are some of the best water holding engineers on the planet, pretty much tied with humans, and bringing them on the landscape and finding spaces for them to be is going to benefit not only our agricultural system, but our water quality, our fire suppression. And so still a huge agricultural fan and supporter, but we can only be involved with so many threads. And I hit the jackpot and was able to pass the farm off to some really good friends. And so it's been handed over to some awesome stewards, and I still live next door, just on a bit of a smaller place that's more forested and not as demanding as what an agricultural field takes. So with that, we can jump into the slideshow. I think we were thinking holding questions for the end, throw them into the chat, and we can kind of go through that. And yeah, happy to be in touch. And also there's an awesome group in Central Oregon, the Dry Farm Collaborative and the Dry Farm Institute out of OSU. There'll be a bunch of information at the end that will kind of, you can dive into a wormhole of a lot more information and community. So we'll just scratch the surface here. Okay. Everybody see that? So this is where I was introduced to dry farming. This is Willow Creek, California, in Humboldt, kind of coastal, but still pretty similar to the Applegate. They get hot summers, dry, and a bit more moisture than we get, but that kind of transitional dry, wet, mild, hot extremes. So this is a 15-acre peach farm. It also involves pluots and pears, a little bit of apple, and then they do about 7 acres of annual crops, 3 to 4 markets a week. When I was there, there was a CSA, not anymore, and a bunch of wholesale. This is not a new technique. Dry farming has been around for a long time. It's on the scale of things, doing annual production is kind of a very small percentage of what dry farming is. It's really been used in grain production and grasslands. So for grazing, it's a lot more applicable and easier. Setting up perennial systems is a bit of a shorter learning curve, but still tricky. And annual production is kind of the expert level, where it really takes a lot of practice, timing. And I was fortunate to spend 2 years with Jock, who's in the yellow shirt, pointing at his old tractor there with his daughter, who's now almost about to go to college. It's crazy, time flies. But he has been a great mentor and still a good friend, even though I'm not in the farming world as much. I help him with pruning every year, and also try to get down there and get a truckload of peaches, because they are the best peaches that you will ever enjoy. Call it a good leaner when you gotta eat the peach and lean forward so all the juices don't just dribble down your shirt. This is more of a scenic exploration of what dry farming is, but this is the orchard in bloom, cover cropped all winter long, and this is us out there pruning in March and April. To Ridgeline. So as I mentioned, I'm on Thompson Creek. This is in new hands now, but this is before the orchard was ever planted. But you can kind of see the layout and where the field production was. Thompson Creek is kind of in the upper end of that picture, and as Barbara mentioned, it's used to be a perennial stream, and now it has become more of a seasonal. So the first year I was there, it dried up in June. In 2018, it ran all year. This year it dried up beginning of July. And so I kind of based my system as being able to use the water seasonally, and as well as doing dry farmed perennials and annuals, I mainly focused on seed production, which is also really useful because as the season progresses, you need less and less water to let the seed develop, dry down. And so that flow worked really well with my location. Dry farming is a pretty unique angle because it takes certain regions. You can't do it everywhere. It's really meant to be in a Mediterranean climate. So where you have wet winters and springs, and then dry summers. Because the idea is to create a dust mulch where you break the capillary action of moisture coming out of the soil. And so if you're in, say, on the East Coast where they get a lot of summer rains, every time rain falls, you get kind of the crust layer and you lose that advantage. And so the moisture comes back, weeds come back. And so it's a important regional location, even in the Willamette Valley. Christy came in. Let's see here. Can I do that? Ask to mute. Okay. Even in the Willamette Valley, it's kind of tricky because there is a bit more summer moisture, but a person I've been working with, Moondog Farms in Eugene, has replicated a really successful dry farmed orchard as well. Soils are important. Water holding capacity is part of the deal, and so you don't want sandy soils. Ideally, it's a nice clay to clay organic matter combination. So this is Central Point, which is what I had at the farm, and that's a soil core going down 3 feet, and you can see in the upper part of it is organic matter, and the further down the soil profile, you're getting into a bit more of clay material, and that's, you can kind of see the clumps, and that's where you're really getting a lot of that water holding capacity. For some reason it just keeps clicking. So a couple of those points we just talked about: the site location. You can see plants, you know, if you look out in your field right now and there's still some green grass, you are in pretty good shape to potentially have a good location for dry farming. The Web Soil Survey, which is a USDA app, can give you your immediate kind of overview of what soil profile you have. The next layer would be to actually go through your field with a soil auger to kind of do some plots and see what you're looking for. Timing is key. You're trying to time where there's still moisture in that soil, and then being able to turn it in when it's not too dry but not too wet. Some of the planting technique, which I'll go over further into the slide, is when there's moisture, increase spacing, pressing soil in around the seed, pre-soaking seed, and then talking more about, dirt mulch is the larger scale, and chips or straw is something for more of the home gardener or just kind of backyard gardener. So using that spring moisture, the turning in the cover crop is always the gamble because it's changing every year. And so reading the weather, getting to know your property, getting to know your soils really helps with that timing, and you're not going to get it right every time. Though it's important to be in the field, seeing how things are adapting, and when you're really ready to turn in the cover crop and then get the dust mulch formed is just takes practice. And the idea with the dust mulch versus straw or chip mulch is that scale is really important. The dust mulch doesn't work in the backyard garden scene because you get the edge effect where, you know, if you're tilling along the edge of your field, always the grass on that tillage grows higher and is more vigorous than grass further away because you've kind of opened that space up and freed the area. And so if you just have a 100 by 100 foot plot, the edge effect kind of comes in and can rob a lot of the moisture from the side. So generally, the dust mulch is on an half acre scale and up. But it also takes equipment. So, but it is extremely effective when you can get into production, especially in the perennial systems. Planting, I spent a lot of time nerding out and experimenting, and this was also just on a 3-acre farm, but it was very intensive. Everything was used. There was the seed production. You can get a lot of value out of a lot smaller space than market gardening. But soaking seed is kind of an age-old technique where you're getting the moisture established in the seed before either sowing it directly or even planting it in the greenhouse. We'll get into a little bit more detail when we go into annual production of direct seeding versus transplanting. And also with dry farming, generally you're giving all the plants either double or triple the spacing you would in a watered technique. So the dust mulch can kind of be a tricky process unless you see it. In the past, we've done these tours with a slideshow, and then we get to go out in the field and actually see the dust mulch. And in August and September, where we are right now, if you were to go out into the orchard and kind of shuffle away the dust mulch 6 to 12 inches and take a spade and dig down another 6 to 12 inches, there would be moist soil. And so this is kind of an example of sand versus the clay, sand, silty loam, and that capillary function where it's holding the moisture longer, and it allows the roots to follow the water is kind of this. So instead of watering from the surface all the time and the roots become accustomed, they stay within the first 12 to 16 inches of the soil profile. But if you plant without any surface water, the roots chase the water. And in some of the trials where they're digging test pits, they've seen roots going down 5 to 8 feet deep, depending on the plant in September. And so it's pretty impressive that you can train the plant to tap in. You can't dry farm everything. Basil, lettuce, really short window stuff. This is really focused on longer season crops. So orchard, vineyard are some of the longest running dry farmed crops, and more of the annuals, which I worked with, are melons, tomatoes, potatoes, dry beans, corn, and winter squash. Winter squash really thrive in the dry farm system. Couple other things is that as an organic farmer, you always, never leave bare soil. And so one of the biggest questions with the dust mulch is that for 4 to 6 months of the season, you do have exposed soil and you are tilling once or twice a year. But in the alternate, you are letting the soil rest. You are growing a big cover crop, incorporating all the green manure, adding a livestock component, which I never did, would be an awesome additive to the dry farm system, because you could bring in herds in the spring and have an awesome forage. Incorporating biochar, which is kind of a whole nother discussion, is also a way to really boost your soil holding capacity, depending on how you implement it and what your expectation on return on investment is. A lot of different nuances in that, but you have the trade-off of not being tied or required to have water. It's a lower turnover in the soil usage, and so depending on the situation, it can work out. It's not for everybody, but it's a balance. We're all trying to find a balance in our systems. So diving into some of the nuances of different crops and whatnot, this is an overview of the field. I used a fair bit of weed mat in my dry farm system because of morning glory. One of the best advantages of dry farming system is once you get that dust mulch established in our Mediterranean climate, there's no more rain, and so your weed pressure can basically be zero. So once you get planted, you get the final dust mulch and it turns into July and there's no more moisture coming onto the surface, you have very little weed pressure. except in my circumstance, morning glory thrives in dry farm circumstances because it's a deep rhizomatous plant and kind of was a bit of a downer in the annual production because you still had to weed. And so with melons and the squashes and the beans that get really stringy and viney, I just using the weed mat really helped to keep that down. And so it was kind of one of those things that just had to be a part of the system. So we'll start in perennials, which is my heart and favorite. I love working with trees, and they are a really good place to start with dry farming, even on a smaller scale. They're a bit more forgiving. I did water in my orchard, which was about 140 apple and pear and persimmons, because in 2015 was a really dry year, but it was set up every 2 weeks for 12-hour sets. So not that often and for long periods of time. So you're really saturating the soil profile and getting the water deep, not just surface. And dry farming is not just using no water. It can be using less water. It can be using water to get established. It doesn't mean no water at all. And so there are a lot of ways to apply this technique depending on your system and what your goals are. Here we are planting 6 years ago. Again, I'm happy to kind of follow up, but planting is one of those really important factors of getting a nice big hole established and putting some biochar and some minerals in the soil, and then all the amendments, kind of the nitrogen on top, just like in perennial systems where the nutrients come from the top, not from within. If you fill the hole with a bunch of nitrogen and manure, you can kind of tend to have a bowl effect where the roots are like, this is a really sweet spot. Why do I want to go anywhere else? So all your amendments up top and just a little bit of mineral and the biochar in the hole can be really helpful to hold on to those nutrients. Pruning is a big one in dry farm system. You're really not expecting to get any fruit production for at least 5 years. So on the left is how the tree came, and on the right is what that tree looked like after pruning. Basically brought it back down to 6 to 10 buds. Buying big trees from nurseries that already have fruit on them in the 2-gallon container is a waste of time and money. I know that's how a lot of them sell trees, but really the younger you can get that tree into the ground, the better you are, especially in dry farmed situations, because you're really trying to match what's above ground and what's below ground. And as you prune really hard to what most people would think, you are transferring that above ground growth into the root system and really establishing a strong, deep rooted base that then 5, 10, and arguably 100 years later will still be supporting the canopy above. Versus if you just kind of let the tree grow above ground, you're like, my tree's growing, this is awesome. But in stress and disease, it doesn't have the root structure to persevere. And so pruning is one of the biggest nuance in perennials, that pruning hard and often is probably one of the biggest time investments in doing the perennial system. There'll be some more pruning pictures. So this is year 2 with the dust mulch fully established. It's kind of looking like July, August there. You can see not a lot of weed pressure, no water, and sure, the trees are getting stressed throughout the day, but as long as you're seeing that leaf recovery in the morning, they're happy campers. And in fall, this is leaf drop. The first rains have come back, and the cover crop has been sowed and incorporated, is just kind of getting started, going into year 3 or 4 there probably. And glorious winter, which is on our doorsteps here, hopefully sooner than later. It's always nice seeing everything getting soaked in, and more snow on our landscape is always an important realization. But things are changing. Reliability on winter moisture is less consistent, and so kind of prepping to be adaptive is going to be an important steps moving forward. Here's Jock coming up, giving the blessing to make really big cuts. You can again see this is year 2. What grew on the left-hand picture, and then what I took out on the right is almost half of the tree, and left a remaining kind of 4 main leaders. This is mainly the open Voss pruning technique, where those 4 stems coming up are going to be what is going to turn into a 20 to 25 foot diameter tree in 15 years. So you got to kind of vision longer term with the perennials and what they will eventually turn into, and it's an investment and a waiting game with a lot of reward down the line. Here again, it's a little hard to kind of see, but on the left, good friend Shelly from Moondog Farms. Without the laser pointer, it's kind of hard to show what grew the 3rd year, and then simplified back down to those 4 main leaders with a little bit of lateral fluff coming out. And year 4, the ladder got broken out, and you can kind of start seeing the tree relax into its bigger shape, and you're getting some of those lateral branches. And last year 5 started getting a bunch of fruit out, and this year the new owners are on a steep learning curve, but have a lot of help to start bringing in boxes of fruit. And that's kind of an aerial view of the orchard again, with the dust mulch fully established. And ironically, the little hut in the middle of the orchard is the house well, but another sign that there's a good source of groundwater in that location. And then another kind of final aspect of perennials is propagation and grafting your own trees. I don't think there's a link, but the Agrarian Sharing Network is a really good resource for perennial propagation material and tips. They're used to be based in Eugene, but have kind of been split up in local. There's a really good one in Williams every year, and I'll try to put their website up at the end of this. But I did about 300 to 400 trees a year that I grafted from varieties that I knew were good keepers, had some drought tolerance, and also picking the rootstock that's most appropriate, which is generally bigger, kind of 80 to 90% of full size trees, which can be anywhere from 20 to 30 feet. Mostly dwarf or semi-dwarf trees don't have as deep of a taproot system, and so they're not as favorable for dry farm systems. And with your own trees, you can have them in a little nursery and then plant them out when they're younger and less stress, and you get to pick what you want. And grafting is a great wintertime project, and it also comes with some layers, but it's really something if you want to grow not just kind of the generic apples, pears, peaches, plums, to explore that world. How are we doing on time? 7:45. Okay. And label. Everything's got to be labeled twice, 3 times. Make a map. Knowing the variety is fun, but for marketability, when people are like, "What kind of fruit is this?" being able to say what it is key, and also the story that comes with it. So that's the nursery. Little window into annual production. I really specialized in melons. They do fabulous in dry farm situations, and you can grow melons that no one else can with irrigated systems, because a lot of the best melons are really thin skinned and they get disease and bug issues when they're irrigated. So this is just a little assortment of what was coming out, and I do miss growing all those melons. Hard to find any comparison. Starting with melons. So melons are really tricky to direct seed in irrigated or non-irrigated. Using the block system is nice because it's a really dense planting medium and a lot less disturbance when you're trying to pull it out of a pot. And in a lot of most of the dry farm, you really want to try to plant them out as early as possible and not let them get root bound or get too big. You want to get the roots in the ground. As we talked about earlier, pre-soaking the seed is a really beneficial angle to any of the annual crops that I mentioned before. This is a ridiculous experiment, but we did it anyways. Jock mentioned when he first started dry farming, he would water in each melon with 2 cups of water. We did that one year. It worked, but for the most part with the melons, I did run drip tape out to water them in after planting, and then we take the drip tape out, and later on we'd put the weed mat down with the drip tape under, water once, and then you can still pull the drip tape out before getting established. It just sort of gives you a little extra boosty to get everybody started. And if you want to water them with a cup, then go for it, because it's still pretty fun. And so there you can kind of see the drip tape with the water. This is a couple weeks after planting. This is getting into probably July. And then once you get into late August, you get that full canopy closure. And these haven't had water since the initial transplant. And I would get anywhere from 500 to 1,000 pounds per section, which is three rows of 100 feet. The crops on the left are irrigated seed crops, but they pump out a lot of a lot of goodness. And at the end of the year, you get to roll it up in a big taco. It kind of works out pretty well and incorporate it back into the field. Tomatoes are another one that benefit from watering in, and also watering less often, but potentially throughout the season, but not letting them get leggy, not letting them get root bound, burying them deep into the soil profile, either with hand digging or with a good ripper bar in your tractor, and then taking that tomato and basically just leaving the top leaves. And so you're actually hilling it back up. And so all that becomes root mass. So it's really getting everybody happily established deep into the ground. That's later in the season, and beautiful, beautiful tomatoes. Potatoes are probably one of the easiest annual productions because you can get started in March or April, depending on when your frost window is, and you're harvesting in late July, August. And so doesn't really take a lot of water. Potatoes are the ultimate kind of storage, resilience food. Still growing potatoes. This year is one of my key: garlic, potatoes, beans. Should be in everybody's backyard garden. Dry beans are also pretty straightforward. Direct seed, soaking the seed, get that initial weeding down, and then they just tend to be really resilient crop. Winter squash is also a really good one. This year, the squash beetle kind of got into my zone, and I didn't do as much work taking care of that. So it looks a little sadder there. But doing dry farmed winter squash is another great annual. A big part about this whole system, especially in the annuals and even in organic production, is that seeds aren't what they used to be. And that's really one of the angles I pursued, was trying to increase dry farmed seed stock. And even though I only did it for 5 years, I started out with some seed from the Newcombs, who had been doing it for 15 and 20 years. And with a few trials side by side, it can make a huge difference. I know a lot of organic farmers who can't source enough seed organically, use conventional seed, and these seeds are bred to work in conventional systems. And so when you put them in organic systems, you can have pest issues, production issues, weed pressure, and it's the same thing transfers to dry farm seed. Seed that's been bred to be stressed, and that you're selecting the successors that are being really proficient and productive, and that they really just find the niche, is a huge gap that we're missing in annual dry farming. With perennials, we have many years to get them established. So as the annual production, you have one shot every year. And so having the base can dramatically increase your success and output. So if anything, even if you do less water, or if you're doing mulch in your backyard and you're just selecting, you can start building your own seed stock, or partner with your neighbors to pick a couple of crops you want. And over the years, there are really some dramatic shifts and output increases in resiliency for anybody. And if you're dry farming or not dry farming, or saving seed is one of the best parts about growing food in my mind. So save more seed, save more of your own seed. So a little bit about just the marketability. We're getting close to the end here. Annual dry farm production is not very profitable, especially when you're starting out. The yields are lower. Generally, fruit is smaller, and it's a lot harder to get things established. So don't go into this expecting to switch your whole system over tomorrow. Jock's been doing it for 20 years, and he started out in the Perennials with an orchard that was already established that he transitioned to, and he's still learning. So just start small and experiment and work your way up towards it, and find little niches. Like at market, I could bring my tomatoes and charge a little bit more and say they're dry farm, but when you have melons that nobody else has, it makes a big difference. The taste is something that you can get into the weeds about, and there's been numerous trials, but the theory is, and I'm a believer, that as these crops have less water, they're less filled with irrigation water, and they're filled with the water that they're sourcing. And so I know the melons have the flavor. I think a lot of the tomatoes definitely have increased flavor, less kind of just watery flavor. And you also can get into the nutrient benefits, where these plants are sourcing layers of soil that no irrigated crop has ever touched with their roots. And so I also think, I have no proof, I don't know of any studies, but it's a feeling that they are more nutrient dense, and especially if you're cultivating your soils in organic ways, that you're really accessing a lot of the soil profile and what's coming from the cropland that you've been cultivating. So it's a lot of give and takes in this, and if you don't have any water, then you can incorporate this to lessen your water demand. If you have all the water you need, you can experiment on little sides. And so a lot of different ways to look at it. And as we are now talking about it, it's a process that's not new, but new to a lot of folks. There, as I mentioned, a lot of layers to it. Bringing people together for a melon party is a great time, and tasting and experiment and seeing what people's reactions are, and seeing what else is possible that you can do with your backyard garden or your 20-acre farm. Diversity is always welcome in any agricultural system, and will only make your business or operation or community stronger. Okay, so now a little bit to give you guys information to go further down the dry farming rabbit hole. These are a couple slides that Amy Garrett, who's with Oregon State University, gave me from some of her presentations, and this will just give you the links to what she's been doing and all the other folks and network that can continue to support you in your dry farming endeavors. So she started out in 2016 at OSU with dry farming in the Maritime Pacific Northwest. So the link the Small Farms Oregon State is there. And then they started the Dry Farming Collaborative, which has a Facebook group and also an email list for trial hosts, because they started out with, I think, just potatoes and tomatoes, and now have expanded into all the crops I've talked about. So they every year look for growers to do trials with seed varieties, and there's certain parameters. You need to grow 50 feet and kind of fill out some forms, but it just sort of can tie you into, you can grow one crop or 20 crops depending on what your interest is. So it's pretty fun to be a part of that. This is kind of the timeline of what the collaborative has done, and who their partners are. That this is being recorded, I'll just kind of blaze through this and you guys can reference back. And yeah, they have annual tasting events. There's events up in Portland. They have their annual meeting in Corvallis, which I think this year will be virtual as well. So that'd be a really good place just to kind of tune in and get a detailed overview on what the next year's plan is going to be. And then recently, Amy started a nonprofit, the Dry Farming Institute, which sort of ties in the OSU angle and the Dry Farming Collaborative angle, and has a place to kind of house everybody. And so they got started 2 years ago. It's all volunteer based, so it's kind of slow, but here again is another link that you guys can tap into to find some more resources and community, and start exploring the possibilities. And with that, leave you with a nice melon picture because they're the best. And let's dive into some questions. If there are any questions.
Andrew, could I ask a question?
Please do.
On your annual crops section, how did you protect the surface layers from losing moisture after your melon plants started to grow? Did you stack back this dust mulch, or what did you use there?
Yeah, so that's the timing angle of when you establish the final dust mulch. There's generally no more rain in the forecast, and so once it's established, it's there and it holds its presence and breaks the capillary action from the moisture below.
And Andrew, I have to admit my ignorance. What is exactly dust mulch?
Great question. That would be a key understanding. So the idea with dust mulch is tilled or cultivated soil ranging from 6 to 12 inches deep, which is basically just a fluffy layer. So it's not compacted.
Okay.
So an example of if you have recently tilled or even kind of hula hoed or scuffed the surface in your home garden, and you leave a footprint in the garden, so you have that kind of compacted footprint. And if you come out in the morning, you'll usually see the footprint has kind of a moisture layer where you and the surrounding area that's been fluffed or cultivated doesn't have that. And so that's kind of the example of the capillary action with compacted soil. Compacted soil generally wicks moisture more than loosened soil. So the idea with the dust mulch is that it's a mulch, like you would use chips or grass or cardboard to hold the moisture in, but you're creating that mulch layer with the soil instead.
And do you know offhand, is that commercially available?
This is you use your own soil to create it. Yep. That's where the cultivation or the usually either a tiller or a disc, either with a walk behind tractor or a larger tractor creates that.
Andrew, I had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One from your annuals part and one from the perennials part. On the annuals, my question was whether soaking the seeds still allows them to pass through a seeder unharmed, or if that has to change your planting. And then on the perennial side, I was curious, I think you said selecting vigorous rootstocks at kind of the 80-90% of full size range. Does that mean, will the trees still end up with just as large in a dry farm system, or do you buy full size stock expecting that the actual eventual size is going to be smaller?
Great questions. Soaking the seed is a hindrance to seeders, big time, for sure. I usually would use one of the drop seeders. And so to kind of explain, someone might be able to do it. It's kind of a 3-foot tube that has a little hatch at the bottom that when you plant it into the soil, it opens the hatch and you drop a seed in. And so because you're doing kind of larger crops like the squash and the beans and not doing lettuces where it's a lot tighter, it's actually a little more efficient of seed use. So you're not just putting in a bunch of seeds. So it takes a little more time up front, but having the pre-soaked seed kind of makes it worthwhile. You know what device I'm talking about, Eric?
Yeah, I can picture it.
And so that kind of eliminates having to deal with seed plates and whatnot. So again, scale is a thing. And then with the rootstock, you're still expecting.
Nice, Colin. It's like mostly our friends.
You're still expecting to have the full size tree. The reason for picking that rootstock is its root vigor and structure on how it interacts with the soil profile.
Got it. So it is going to develop still to the full size.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Who else we got out there? Questions, concerns?
Andrew, are you seeing the chat? There's a few questions in the chat.
There are. What do we got here? Vicky, what cover crop do you use? I have used through Peaceful Valley. They have soil booster mix, peas, vetch, rye. Organic pea seed has been more and more unreliable because of the pea weevil. And so I know a lot of organic farmers are using more just rye and oats. Cover crop is another one that's really tricky to find locally and affordably. So I don't know if anybody else has other suggestions on cover crop sources, since I've kind of been out of that for a couple of years, but that's what I used on the smaller scale. It's being recorded. Yes. Oats from PackBot near GP is a great source for those in the Applegate Valley or Rogue Valley, which Jonathan mentioned. I would incorporate that into my my blend too, to kind of break it down. Jonathan, is there a benefit to incorporating cover crop at brown stage versus green manure when dry farming? If you were to wait till brown stage, generally it would be too dry, because at brown stage the moisture, the cover crop is already kind of pulling too much moisture out of the soil, and you're losing a lot of that spring moisture. So it's kind of the reason you want to incorporate at flower or before flower stage, to not only kind of get the organic boost, but also preserve as much soil moisture as possible.
I'm curious to ask how you gauge whether you've cut off too much of the tree or not during the early years. But I noted how you said that your mentor is there accompanying.
Yeah.
What are the details of the thinking behind kind of picking how much or how little you take off?
A lot of hand holding. The first year is pretty easy, because you're really just reducing it down to the single leader and just visually looking for the individual live buds on the tree. As the tree continues to grow, you kind of need to balance giving it room to grow, but also reducing that above ground canopy to increase the size of the root mass. So that's a bit of a higher level. It really depends on how much the tree grew the previous year, what the soil conditions are. Are you seeing vigor? Did it have any disease issues? You might want to prune it harder. Did it really put on a lot of growth? Maybe prune less because it's tapped in. And so it can be a pretty dynamic engagement in those first 5 years. Anybody else feeling questiony out there? Overwhelmed? Too much information? Not enough information?
I have a question. This is Diane. So is it possible to dry farm without tillage?
Yeah, that's a great question. On the home scale, I'm all about mulching these now. Trying to get away from large scale tillage and not being in production farming. So this kind of comes back to dry farming doesn't necessarily mean no irrigation. So in the perennial systems, it's totally possible to use chips, which is my favorite technique. Straw works as well. You really just want to try to avoid really fresh chips, or at least don't incorporate the chips into the soil, because you can get a nitrogen vacuum where raw chips are going to absorb a lot of surface nitrogen, which could affect especially younger trees. So, but even in those situations where I have chipped, I still am irrigating, but back to that way less often and usually for longer periods of time. So that's the ticket. And for annual production, I don't have any experience doing annual production with little or no irrigation without establishing the dust mulch, just because their root system is so much shallower, and it's just that reset every year. So I think that's kind of the limiting factor is annual versus perennial. Perennial, definitely. Annual, not that I'm aware of.
Cheers. Thanks.
Is anybody running, having kind of ideas of doing dry farming in the near future, or is this kind of any aha moments from the presentation that you want to try something out next year?
I'm definitely on not a production scale, but just for our own personal, just to try stuff out, inspired.
I'd like to try it myself, but it's a little intimidating. I have to think it through a little bit more, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, myself, I'm really inspired to try the fruit, and I'm really happy with the presentation, the photos that you provided in terms of the pruning that needs to be done. That was good for me to know. And so yeah, I'm inspired to try the dry farming with the fruit. I also wanted to let you know that there's some messages that people sent some questions in on.
What was the last part?
There were some messages that people sent some questions in on. Yeah, in the chats.
I have been checking that. It looks like Karen wrote a new one. My persimmon trees have been in the ground 8 years and have never produced. I have also never pruned them. Could that be in part why they have never produced? They're the 4 are only 4 to 6 feet tall. Karen, where? You're in the Applegate as well, Karen.
No, I'm in Glendale.
Oh, you're in Glendale. Gotcha.
And they are in a very, I have a lot of springs here, so they're in wet ground.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not this year. They're not in wet ground this year, that for the first time. But that's where persimmon trees grow in the Midwest, is in the understory and near rivers and creeks.
Yeah. Persimmons are finicky little buggers. I have a bunch that had marginal success, mainly with spring freezes. They're really sensitive to that, and also having making sure you have the pollinators. They are really sensitive to cross pollination. So checking your varieties to see if there's cross pollination going on. So if they're all the same persimmon, that is definitely one of your problems. And pruning is key for fruit trees. They will survive and they will grow and they'll get bigger, but having airflow and light access into the inside of the tree and weight distribution. Most fruit trees were kind of created by people, and they're kind of evolved to coexist with care and TLC from the people who planted them. So yeah, pruning would be a key fact, just to see how they would respond.
I thank you. They were bare root trees from one nursery. So
yeah,
I could go to Eugene. There's a man in Eugene that raises a lot of persimmons, and I should try to get some trees from him, and that way they'd be different.
Yeah, we just gotta chat with him about your what varieties you have, and then what varieties would be good pollinators for him.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
let's see here. Vicky, when you planted your trees, you said large holes, amend on top and fill with what? So yeah, the initial hole is generally about 2 to 3 feet diameter and about 2 feet deep. And then, so you're just kind of loosening the soil. In the hole, I would put about a cup of calcium or oyster shell and about a half a cup of azomite, which is just a to Z mineral. And in the later years, when I started making my own biochar, or you can also buy biochar, to add a couple cups of crushed biochar into the hole. You kind of mix that all around and then backfill the hole with what you dug out to get the hole to the right height where the tree sits appropriate height so that the graft, or if it was a potted plant, is at the same ground level as the pot, or the graft is above ground. And then just backfill with the soil, make sure it's well compacted so it doesn't settle, and then on top sprinkle either some chicken manure or just manure to kind of get things started.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We really appreciate everything. And sorry, I missed out on some of it. The cell wasn't working, but I would love, our intention was to have a live event, and I hope that we can gather again with all of us, maybe in the spring, and do a hands-on event and maybe do some planting, so we can really, for those of us that are more tactile and actually doing it, might be more helpful too. So just really appreciate everybody's time. And Andrew, thank you so much for putting together a beautiful presentation. It will be recorded, so we'll send this out to all of you that came tonight, and then those others that registered. And we look forward to doing more events and learning more from each other and with each other. So if you want to hear, get inspired on other ideas or thoughts, please send them Jennifer's way to our family farms, and we can host some other learning experiences together, both Zoom and hands-on. So thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful night. And it was good to see everyone. So I'm going to let you off the hook, Andrew.
That I'll be around, answer more questions, and happy planting.